The attorney may call his first witness.
Lucas Spencer, Jr.
Lucas Spencer, Jr. to the stand. Place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth?
Speed.
Speed.
Lucas Spencer, Jr., who goes by the nickname of Lucky, lives with his family in what was the Ward family home at the time of Bradley Ward's death. He is being sworn in now.
I do.
Please be seated.
After what grandfather did to Lucky's dog, kid's gonna be out for blood.
Lucky's not like that.
Oh, no? Like father, like son.
I understand that you prefer to be called Lucky.
Yes, sir.
All right, then. Lucky, what is this?
A gun.
And have you seen this gun before?
Can I hold it? Yes, this is the 38 that almost killed my best friend.
Would you clarify that?
Yeah, my friend Sly and me were exploring in my attic.
Meaning the attic of your home at 24 Royal Street, which formerly belonged to the Ward family?
Right. And, I mean, there's all kinds of neat stuff up there. So we were just exploring, and, he felt something behind one of the rafters. And all of a sudden, a gun went off, and, I mean, I was sure he'd been shot. But luckily, he hadn't. And, my parents came up, and my dad took the gun away from us.
And you're sure that this is the same gun?
I'm positive.
And when was this?
It was about 6 months ago.
Let the record show that the witness has identified State Exhibit A as the gun retrieved from the attic of the old Ward house. No further questions.
Mr. Stannis,
No questions at this time, Your Honor.
you may step down.
State calls Lucas Spencer, Sr. to the stand.
Lucas Spencer, Sr. to the stand. Place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right hand.
Why did, Lucky have to testify?
The defense might try to claim that Edward Quartermain was set up, so the prosecution has to establish how the evidence came to light.
You concur that this is the gun that your son gave to you that day in the attic?
Yes?
And what did you do with it?
I emptied the cylinder.
And how many bullets were left?
4.
A ballistic expert will testify that this gun holds 6 bullets. And you heard only 1 discharge?
Right.
What did you do next?
I sent the boys downstairs, and my wife and I searched the attic. In case, you know.
Did you find anything else out of the ordinary?
Oh, yeah. Plenty of stuff. Saxophone that I'm looking forward to learning how to play.
Did you find this blood-stained blue bathrobe?
Could I, Yeah, that looks like it.
Yes. Let the record show that the witness has identified State Exhibit B. Now, did you show the gun and the robe to Mary May Ward, the victim's mother?
At that time, I didn't know there was a victim.
Did you ask her about them?
I asked her about the gun.
Not the robe?
No.
Why not?
I saw no reason to.
What did she say about the gun?
That she didn't know anything about it.
And did you believe her?
I had no reason not to.
Stealing Schultz fits. Stannis won't fare any better.
Did you have a reason to question Mrs. Ward when a body was found in your backyard?
Objection.
Sustained. Unless you choose to designate this a hostile witness, refrain from asking leading questions.
Mr. Spencer, did you discover a body in your yard?
Yes. My wife and I were planting a bush. I believe it was a lilac bush. My wife wanted the hole 6 feet deep. She insisted it be 6 feet deep. Actually, she was pregnant at the time, and if you know her, do you have children?
Whose body was it?
Well, the autopsy said it was Bradley Ward, but if I were you, I'd ask an expert.
I will. Thank you. Did you go back and question Mrs. Ward in light of this discovery?
No. I was under the assumption that the police were doing the questioning.
Nevertheless, you learned
investigation.
certain facts before the police, right? We've heard testimony from Kylie Quinlan as to her relationship with the deceased. Dr. Steve Hardy has testified as to the miscarriage Miss Quinlan suffered following an automobile accident in which she and the deceased were forced off the road. Now, didn't you finally take it upon yourself to demand some answers from Mary May Ward?
I have never demanded anything of Mary May Ward.
Did you tell her what you learned?
No. Her grandson, Justice, did. I was there. We explained to her that the information would probably become public because of the investigation. And she told us what she presumed to be the truth, that Bradley had committed suicide. She was awakened by a noise. She found him in the backyard with a gun in his hand. And she buried him in the rose garden.
And did she say why?
So that his work wouldn't be compromised.
Now, you were instrumental in convincing Mrs. Ward that her son's death was not suicide. How?
She said something woke her, a noise, and then she heard a shot. And I kept wondering if the noise that she heard could have been another shot. So Justice Ward and I investigated the trunk of a tree near where Bradley Ward's body was found, and we discovered another bullet.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're prepared to have an expert testify that that bullet could not have come from the gun labeled State Exhibit A, Bradley Ward's own gun. This expert will testify that that bullet came from a Luger. Had you ever seen a Luger in Port Charles?
Only one. Well, actually two. A pair.
And to whom did they belong?
Edward Quartermain.
Objection. Your Honor. Your Honor, the witness is no ballistics expert. We're prepared to prove Mr. Spencer had considerable personal antagonism toward the defendant.
6 months ago, you find a loaded gun and a bloody dressing gown hidden in your attic, but you don't turn them into the police. Why?
I don't like the police.
And naturally, you wanted to protect your new friends, the Wards, in the event that these things might implicate them in any way. But you seem to be eager to cooperate with the police when doing so might implicate a man whose business venture you oppose.
Objection.
Sustained. This witness is not on trial.
No further questions, Your Honor.
You may step down.
Thank you.
Mr. Schultz?
The state calls Mary May Ward.
Mary May Ward to the stand. Place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please be seated.
Mrs. Ward, in your own words, would you please tell the jury what happened on the night that your son Bradley died?
He called me from Albany that afternoon wanting to see me. I could sense that something was wrong because it had been a grueling legislative session. He was pushing daycare, tax reform, school breakfast programs, and he was fighting racial hiring quotas for the new airport development.
In which Edward Quartermain was heavily invested.
And when I saw Bradley, later on, he was a shadow of himself. We sat on the porch drinking iced tea, and my son unloaded his soul. I had heard rumors about Elizabeth Jackson, how close they were, and how much she depended on her, but I knew nothing of Kylie Quinlan until then. Bradley told me he had spent the previous weekend with Jack Bolan, Edward Quartermain, Lee Baldwin, and Frank Smith at the Quartermain house on Long Island at Jack Bolan's request. He told me they wanted him to back off the tax bill and the opposition to the airport. They wanted him not to run for any office ever again, and in return, they would not go public with information about the relationships with Elizabeth Jackson and Kylie Quinlan.
And did your son agree?
He said he needed a few days to think it over, but he came to the conclusion that there was no acceptable solution. We talked until midnight, but I was the one that was filled with rage. He seemed resigned, empty, and I tried to put some fight back into him, but he was so tired. I could feel the ache in my own bones. So I left him there. He was stretched across the bed in his own room. And then I went to bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay there with so much rage for those that would try to destroy a good, decent man for greed and profit. I was angry.
But finally, you did fall asleep, and something woke you. What?
I wasn't sure at the time, but later I found out that it was a gunshot that killed my boy.
This is an artist's rendering of what you said you saw when you went down to your garden that night. Is it accurate?
Not really. There's so much you don't see. The smell of wet grass, warm blood growing cold. I knew he was dead before I touched him, before my fingers went into the wound. I held him. I sat there and I held my son for a long time, knowing that that was the last time I'd have him in my arms.
You thought he'd killed himself.
Yes.
So you buried him there in the rose garden to keep that secret.
Yes.
When did you learn that your son had actually been murdered?
When Luke and my grandson Justice found another bullet in the tree.
Thank you, Mrs. Ward. I apologize for asking you to revisit such painful memories. No further questions.
Mr. Stannis?
No questions at this time, Your Honor.
You may step down.
State calls Jack Russo to the stand.
Jack Russo to the stand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please be seated.
Mr. Russo, will you state your occupation for the court, please?
Ballistics expert?
Now, you were asked to examine this gun, is that correct?
Yes, I was. It's a .38 revolver that 20 years ago was registered to Dr. Bradley Ward.
Now, this bullet was found in a tree behind the bench where Dr. Ward was shot. Is it from a .38?
No, sir. It's from a Luger.
Is it possible to determine which Luger?
Yes, sir. A gun barrel leaves distinctive marks on a spent bullet, sort of like fingerprints.
Now, You were also asked to examine this gun.
Yes, I was.
Now, in your expert opinion, did the bullet that killed Bradley Ward come from this gun?
Yes, sir, it did.
Let the record show that Mr. Russo has identified a Luger belonging to the defendant, Edward Quartermain. The state enters the Luger and the bullet into evidence as State's Exhibit C and D. No further questions?
Mr. Stannis?
You say that the bullet that killed Bradley Ward was shot from that gun. In your expert opinion, can you ascertain who pulled the trigger that night?
No, sir, of course not.
No further questions.
You may step down. The court calls a brief recess.
All right.
Mamie, I told the sitter that I'd come back right after you testified, but are you sure you're all right?
Oh, you go and give the baby girl a big hug for me.
Grandfather, can I ask you anything?
There's some evidence in my favor.
This may be it.
What is it?
You may be right. It's proof positive that Jack Bolan was in cahoots with Frank Smith long before they claimed to know each other.
Good work. Bolan's testifying next. Well, Edward, it looks like the worm has turned.
Good, thank you.
We expect Jack Bolan to be called as the state's next witness, but there seems to be a delay.
Gentlemen, let me see the evidence.
If you're sure you're all right, I may slip out for a while. Lois leaves this afternoon for Puerto Rico.
Is her Godspeed for me?
Don't you worry. Grandfather will be vindicated.
I'm going to allow this to be introduced, Mr. Schultz. Let's proceed.
State calls Jack Bolan.
Place your left hand on the Bible, raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Please be seated.
Mr. Bolan, 20 years ago, at the time of Bradley Ward's death, that very night, in fact, you had occasion to meet with the defendant, Edward Quartermain.
Yes, he wanted several of us to meet in my house at 1 in the morning, actually.
Couldn't wait till the next day?
Well, when Edward wants to do something, he doesn't like to wait. He's a man of action. But he clearly reached his limits where Bradley Ward was concerned.
Talk about damning a man with praise.
According to your statement to the police, Bradley Ward had been issued an ultimatum earlier?
That's right. I assumed that Edward might have had a response, hence the urgent meeting. But I was wrong. Edward was extremely agitated when he arrived. And, he said that he had decided to handle the whole Bradley Ward situation himself.
How?
Well, he didn't say. Just that the ultimatum wasn't a good idea and that we should drop it.
And did you all agree to that?
Well, of course not. I tried to calm him down, but he just became increasingly emotional about the whole thing. So finally, we suggested that he go back to his apartment and get some rest. And in retrospect, one of us should have gone with him.
Crucify him when you get the chance.
What's the last thing that Edward Quartermain said to you that night? Mr. Bolan, you are under oath.
Well, he was very angry. He said he'd take care of Bradley. Then he stormed out.
And did the others leave then?
No, we all felt the need for a good stiff drink.
And about a half hour after that, you received a phone call.
Yes, it was Edward. He said the matter had been resolved and that Bradley Ward wouldn't cause us any more trouble.
And how did you interpret that?
Frankly, I didn't ask questions for ethical reasons.
He used to have an ethical bone in his body.
Did you and Edward Quartermain ever discuss this matter again?
No, wasn't any point. Bradley was never seen again.
So, Edward Quartermain knew what he was talking about when he said that Bradley Ward wouldn't cause you any more trouble. No further questions.
Mr. Stannis, do you wish to cross-examine?
Yes, Your Honor. Let's give Jack a taste of his own medicine.